In a tight-knit black church community in Durham, North Carolina, the beloved choir director, Miss Loretta James, is known for her angelic voice and commanding presence. She's mentored dozens of teens, revived the gospel choir, and even helped organize food drives for the community. But when a new pastor arrives and begins digitalizing old records, he stumbles upon a red-flagged alias connected to Miss Loretta, a name linked to a 1992 armed bank robbery in Oakland, California, where a radical activist group vanished without a trace. The pastor quietly launches a private investigation, but he's not the only one digging. A retired FBI agent living nearby recognizes Loretta from an old case file. Meanwhile, a curious teenage singer in the choir begins suspecting something after overhearing a tense phone call in the church office. As whispers spread, Loretta's peaceful church life begins to unravel. But the deeper they dig, the more it becomes clear she didn't just run from something, she ran to protect someone. Before we uncover today's case, a quick reminder. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single clue, twist, or breakthrough in the stories to come. Now, let's dive into the case. It started with the song she didn't sing. Sunday morning at MT, Olive Missionary Baptist had always been about pageantry and praise. The choir robes shimmered like royal satin under the stained glass sun, and Sister Loretta James stood front and center the way she had for 20 years. When she raised her arms, the congregation knew healing was on the way. But that morning in June, just as the pianist hit the first notes of his Eyes on the Sparrow, she froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The soprano next to her, young Simone Banks, glanced sideways in confusion. Loretta's hand trembled ever so slightly. She turned from the pulpit, nodded to the organist to continue without her, and stepped back into the shadow of the choir loft. Folks thought maybe her voice had cracked, that she'd caught a chill, or maybe it was grief from losing her sister last month. That's what she let them believe. Only Pastor Wells noticed her eyes, the way they locked on the back of the sanctuary, at a stranger, a man in a plain navy suit, sitting alone. No Bible, no hymn book, just watching. That afternoon, after the pews had emptied and fried fish platters were being boxed in the church basement, Loretta slipped away to the choir room. She moved with her usual grace, but her heartbeat thudded loud enough to drown out the gospel humming in the hallway. She pulled open a dusty cabinet near the back and slid out a tarnished tin. Inside, beneath faded sheet music and old choir gloves, was a prepaid flip phone she hadn't touched in years. She stared at it. Her fingers hovered, then dialed. It rang, once, twice. Then, a voice she hadn't heard in over a decade. "You said you'd never call again." "He was in the church," Loretta whispered. "It's happening." Pastor Wells hadn't intended to snoop, but curiosity had a way of tempting righteous men, especially young ones with Wi-Fi and a newly issued church laptop. He was only trying to update the directory. He wanted to include volunteer bios on the church website, nothing invasive. Just a quick check, he told himself. He typed Loretta's full name into the background check software for insurance reasons. And there it was, L.J. Whitmore, not Loretta James. A federal warrant out of Alameda County. Armed robbery. Affiliated with a radical activist collective. Presumed dead. His hand gripped the mouse so tightly it clicked twice. Across town, in a 2-bedroom apartment where sunlight filtered through blinds taped shut, retired special agent Walter Price cracked open a beer and sank into his recliner. His knees didn't work like they used to, but his mind still raced at the snap of memory. He held the bulletin in his hands, the one a buddy still on payroll had passed along after facial rec software pinged it. He stared at the grainy image from the Mount Olive Church live stream. Loretta James. But he knew her as L.J. Whitmore, the smooth-talking escape driver who vanished after the People's United Bank heist of '92, the only one who'd never been caught, the one who supposedly drove into Lake Merritt and disappeared without a body. Now she was singing Jesus hymns in a choir robe. He leaned forward, cracked his knuckles, and said out loud, "Well, well, well, you're a long way from Oakland, darlin'." Back in the church parking lot, 16-year-old Simone Banks sat in her mom's Buick, scrolling TikTok half-heartedly while she waited. She paused when she saw the notification from the choir's private group chat. It was a voicemail from Loretta. Simone hit play. The message was garbled, whispered, almost accidental. But she caught the words. He was in the church, not safe anymore. "We run if I don't show Monday." Her stomach dropped. Run from who? Simone muttered. She replayed it 3 times, then hit save. Inside Mount Olive's sanctuary, Loretta stood alone, humming faintly. She ran her fingers across the keys of the old baby grand piano. Her hands were steadier now, calmer. She whispered, almost like prayer, "They think I forgot who I used to be." Then she smiled. Not sweet, not soft, but like someone who'd outrun more than time. Simone Banks had never been the nosy type, but she'd grown up in the silence between grown folks' words. Raised by a mother who believed in paying attention without reacting, she'd learned early that people said the most when they thought nobody was listening. And that voicemail from Miss Loretta? It wasn't just a voicemail. It was a door half open, and Simone wasn't the kind to leave something like that alone. Monday morning, while most students at Hillside High were filing into class, Simone was in the choir room early twisting open a bottle of honey ginger tea and pretending to reorganize sheet music. Miss Loretta was late. She was never late. At 8:19 a.m., Simone's phone buzzed. A new voice memo in the choir group chat, this one from Deacon Ellis. "Miss Loretta asked me to let y'all know she's taking a leave of absence family matters. Rehearsals postponed this week." Simone's jaw tightened. Family matters was the same excuse her uncle used when he relapsed and disappeared for 6 months. She grabbed her backpack and left. Across town, Pastor Wells sat behind his desk, sweat dampening the collar of his shirt. He stared at the computer screen like it might reach out and bite him. He'd read the file again. And again. Still couldn't believe it. Armed robbery. Federal warrant. L.J. Whitmore, now calling herself Loretta James, was wanted for a crime that had never been solved. And here she was, playing the piano every Sunday, holding bake sales, mentoring teenage girls. He thought of confronting her. But how do you confront someone who's been hiding in plain sight for 2 decades and doing more good than most of the people in the pulpit? He shut the laptop. This wasn't something he could pray away. Simone's first stop was the church. Locked. The second was the corner diner on Fayetteville Street, where Miss Loretta sometimes had breakfast after rehearsal. Simone slid into a booth by the window, ordered a biscuit and a Sprite, and waited. Nothing. She tried calling. No answer. But when the waitress brought the check, she handed Simone something else too. "She told me if a young girl came looking," the waitress said, "to give her this." It was a folded church program. Inside it, scribbled in shaky cursive, "If they ask questions, don't answer. If someone in a suit follows you, go to 309 Little Pine Road. Ask for Nettie. Tell her I'm cashing in my song." Simone blinked. Song? Cash in? What was this? Spy code? But she tucked it into her hoodie and slid out of the booth before she lost her nerve. Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, Agent Walter Price leaned against his black Chevy Tahoe, watching the front doors of MT. Olive from behind tinted sunglasses. The church didn't look like much. A sun-faded steeple, cracked sidewalk, a few shrubs barely clinging to life in the heat. He'd seen operations run out of worse. He sipped from a thermos, opened his weathered notebook, and stared at the names he'd circled. Whitmore, Portman, Nettie Daniels. He hadn't heard that last one in years. Nettie had been the one who helped LJ disappear. A rural fixer, underground connections. Back then, they thought she was just a ghost story the radicals told to scare off rookies. But the address he'd just traced from Loretta's last known emergency contact? 309 Little Pine Road. His pen tapped against the page. Time to pay a visit. Simone didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just followed the streets past the bus depot, across the old train tracks, and toward the edge of the woods, where Little Pine Road sat nestled under a canopy of oaks that whispered even when the wind was still. 309 was a weather-beaten house with peeling paint, a porch swing that moved on its own, and a wooden cross nailed into the oak tree out front. She hesitated, heart hammering, then knocked, a long pause. Then the door creaked open. And there she was, a woman in her 70s, skin like bark and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She wore an apron dusted with flour and didn't bother to say hello. "You must be the girl who can't mind her own business," the woman said. Simone flinched. "Are you Nettie?" "I am. But that don't mean I'm here to help. I need to know where she went." "You need to sit down," Nettie said, turning away. "Because what you think you're stepping into ain't a puddle. Baby, it's a grave." Back at the church, Pastor Wells stood before the pulpit, alone. He'd pulled the old choir records from the archives. Photos from 2007, 2012, 2019. Loretta was always there front and center. And yet, no tax forms before 2005. No address before 2003. No church membership record before 2002. As if she'd appeared out of thin air. He looked up at the mural behind the choir loft, Jesus with his arms open wide, and whispered, "What am I supposed to do?" His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. A voice on the line, older, gruffer. "She ran once. You think she won't do it again? Tell her I'm coming. And this time, I'm not asking." The line went dead. Simone sat at Nettie's kitchen table, staring at the jar of pickled eggs and the old rotary phone mounted on the wall. Nettie lit a cigarette, sighed through her nose. "You want to know why Loretta ran?" she asked. "It ain't just because of what she did. It's because of what she didn't do. There's a difference, baby. One haunts your record. The other? That haunts your soul." Simone swallowed hard. "Where is she now?" Nettie stared at her for a long beat, then said, "She's not hiding. Not anymore. Somewhere far from town, in a dark room lined with old newspaper clippings and a corkboard full of pins and yarn." Loretta James took off her wedding ring and placed it on the table. Next to it was a revolver and a set of keys, and a photograph of 4 young women in black turtlenecks, fists raised. She circled one of the faces in red ink and whispered, "It ends where it started." In the attic of 309 Little Pine Road, Nettie kept a safe behind a row of dusty hymnals and a fake Bible with no pages inside. She turned the dial slowly left, right again, and when the steel clicked open, the air shifted. It wasn't the kind of safe that held cash or jewelry. This one held truth. Faded photographs, letters, a microcassette tape, a laminated ID from a group that hadn't existed officially since 1993, the Black Horizon Collective. Simone hovered by the attic stairs, arms crossed tight over her chest. "You said she didn't just run," she said. "You said it wasn't about what she did, but what she didn't do." Nettie sat down on the edge of a storage trunk and looked at her like she was sizing her for something heavier than just an answer. "She didn't pull the trigger," Nettie said. "But she didn't stop it either." Oakland, California, September 1992. The People's United Bank didn't see it coming. It wasn't a smash and grab. It was surgical. Timed to the minute. 4 members of the Black Horizon Collective, dressed in utility uniforms, entered the building through the service door. Loretta, then known as L.J. Whitmore, waited in the van outside, engine idling. She thought it was just about stealing documents. Evidence the collective believed proved illegal government experiments were being funneled through that bank's investment wing. It was supposed to be a leak, a warning. But then one of the members, Kayla Nix, lost control. Gun drawn. 2 security guards down. 1 dead. Loretta never went inside. But the moment that shot was fired, her life became part of that crime. They burned the evidence. Split, disappeared. And she drove them straight into the fog, past the harbor, to the safe house in East Bay. That was the last night she used the name Whitmore. Back in Durham, Pastor Wells was staring at the corkboard in his office. On it were printed snapshots, names, years. The federal warrant he'd downloaded. An Oakland Tribune article from '93. And a DMV photo of a young woman with fire in her eyes and the same cheekbones as Miss Loretta. He traced the photos with his fingers. He wanted to believe there was some mistake, but he couldn't deny the face or the facts. Then his phone lit up again. This time, not a call, but a message. Unknown number. Stay out of it. This ain't a pulpit matter. You say anything, you'll be next. He turned toward the cross on the wall and whispered, Lord, what kind of mess have I walked into? At the edge of an old train yard near the outskirts of town, Loretta stood in a long tan coat, a canvas duffel at her feet. She looked out at the empty tracks, her breath fogging in the early evening air. She wasn't running. Not this time. Inside the duffel, 3 burner phones, a dossier with the initials KN, a photograph of Simone Banks with her high school transcript, and a folder labeled Operation Lark. A voice called from behind. You still hum when you're nervous. Loretta turned. It was Nina Portman, the last surviving member of the old collective besides her. Older now, hair streaked with silver, eyes hardened by years of hiding. You're still showing up late, Loretta replied dryly. Nina didn't smile. I heard you let a kid hear the tape. I didn't mean to, Loretta said. But maybe it's time someone else knows what was buried. She's a kid, Loretta. No, she's me. 25 years ago. Simone sat in the attic holding the microcassette. There were no cassette players in her house, but Nettie had an old one in the garage. The tape crackled when she pressed play. Then a voice, clear but low. This is L.J. Whitmore. If you're hearing this, the story you've been told is only half the truth. She listened, start to finish. Twice. It wasn't just a robbery. It was an act of sabotage intended to halt a secret research fund that was allegedly backing unethical experiments on poor black communities in the 1980s. Names were named. Agencies, too. Loretta hadn't pulled the trigger, but she'd known what the mission could escalate to. Simone sat in silence, shaken. She wasn't sure what horrified her more, the lies, or the possibility that Loretta had been right. Walter Price was getting closer. He stood across the street from Nettie's house now, watching it through binoculars. A black sedan rolled by and parked half a block down. 2 men in cheap suits stepped out. Not feds, at least, not official. He recognized one from a ghost unit in Quantico, a name they scrubbed from databases years ago. He cursed under his breath. He wasn't the only one still hunting the old collective. And if those men were here, it meant Operation Lark was live again. Loretta stepped into a motel room off Route 301, same place she'd used once in '98. She opened the folder on the bed. Inside was a photo of a government building, shiny, modern, with a small Black Lives Matter sticker pasted crookedly near the entrance. This was where the truth was stored now. She folded the folder shut and whispered, "Let's finish what we started." But she didn't know that Simone had followed her, that the teenager had used Google Maps, intuition, and 1 line of voicemail audio to track her all the way out here, that she was standing across the street, hoodie up, heart thudding. and that she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. The knock came just after 1:13 a.m. Loretta didn't flinch. She was already sitting upright on the edge of the motel bed, fully dressed, duffel bag packed, folder sealed tight under her arm. The knock came again, softer this time, then a voice. "It's me." She opened the door slowly. Simone stood there, soaked in sweat and fear and questions she had no business carrying. "I know I wasn't supposed to follow you," she whispered. "But you said in the tape, if someone was willing to listen, then they deserved to hear the truth." Loretta stared at her for a long moment, then opened the door wider. They sat across from each other at the small round table under the dim yellow motel light. "I know you think I'm just a kid," Simone said. "But if they're still doing what you tried to stop, then somebody's got to speak. And maybe the people who can speak are the ones who don't have anything left to lose?" Loretta smiled faintly. "That's what I said, right before I disappeared." Simone pulled out her phone and set it on the table. "I posted the tape to a burner account on TikTok. It's got 32,000 views already." Loretta blinked. Simone shrugged. "You said we're fighting ghosts. Well, ghosts don't like light. So I turned on the flashlight." Outside, in the parking lot, Walter Price watched the motel room through his windshield. His hands tightened around the steering wheel as he watched the girl's silhouette move across the curtain. She shouldn't be here. This wasn't her fight. But the kid had done something even the FBI couldn't manage in 3 decades. She brought L.J. Whitmore back into the light. And that meant the wolves were coming. His burner buzzed. "Unknown. Stand down. We'll take it from here." He looked up at the motel again and made his decision. By sunrise, Durham's church crowd was buzzing with more than just Sunday scripture. Someone had leaked a file to the Durham Post, a story with names, faces, old newspaper clippings about a long-buried heist and the woman who'd become a saint in choir robes. Loretta's photo ran beside a headline in bold red, "Fugitive or Freedom Fighter?" Miss Loretta didn't show up at MT Olive that day. Neither did Simone. But Pastor Wells did. He stepped into the pulpit, lips tight, sermon notes untouched. "There comes a time," he said slowly, "when the truth walks into the room dressed in someone you thought you knew." He looked out at the pews, at the stunned deacons, at the weeping elders. And sometimes that truth sings better than the lie ever did. They met one last time on a bench just outside the North Carolina Supreme Court building. Loretta wore gray slacks, a clean blouse, no makeup. Her wrists bore the weight of her past handcuffs, glinting in the sun. Simone sat beside her, quiet. "I'm sorry you got caught," Simone said. "I'm not," Loretta replied. "Some songs need an ending. Will they lock you up forever?" "Maybe," Loretta said, "but maybe not. They know if they bury me now, they're burying the file too. And people are watching this time." Simone reached into her backpack and pulled out a printed petition. Over 100,000 signatures. "I mailed one to the governor's office." "And your lawyer said the DOJ's already under pressure," Loretta chuckled. "You're relentless." Simone smiled. "You taught me that." 2 months later, in a courtroom filled with cameras and hushed whispers, United States v. L.J. Whitmore opened with testimony not from the prosecution, but from a retired federal agent named Walter Price. He read a statement under oath about a buried operation, sealed documents, misclassified files, and government misconduct tied to unethical research projects long swept under the rug. It didn't excuse what happened, but it changed what it meant. The sentence came down lighter than expected. 5 years probation, time served under supervision, and sealed testimony for future hearings. Simone was in the courtroom that day. So was Pastor Wells, and so was Nediac pulled low, cane across her lap, humming quietly. Loretta never returned to the choir stand. But her story didn't end behind bars. She began speaking quietly at first, then on stages, then through interviews about choices, about silence, about the difference between guilt and grief. Simone went on to graduate high school and was offered a scholarship to Howard University for journalism. Her essay was titled, "What a Fugitive Taught Me About Freedom." Every Sunday, the choir still sings "His Eye is on the Sparrow." They leave the front center spot in the choir stand empty, not because they lost their leader, but because that silence sings the loudest now, and because sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that finally stop running and start telling the truth. Some stories don't end with a verdict. They echo in quiet rooms, in broken trust, in lives forever altered. This wasn't just a case file. It was a warning about what happens when fear replaces facts, when systems protect themselves, and when good people look away because it's easier. What happened here could happen anywhere, because injustice doesn't need a reason, just an opening. So if this story reached you, don't let it vanish. Speak up. Share it. Start the ripple. Because every time we shine a light, we take power from the shadows. And maybe, just maybe, the next story won't end the same. Like, comment, share. Let your voice join the case.